Hey, cuties. Welcome to the Dark Side of Perfect. I'm your host, Maggie, and today I want to talk about something that I think builds on last week's episode. So, last week's episode was with my friend Katie, and we talked about the job application process, what job hunting looks like, the career pivot. But other than that, I think when you're on this perfect girl journey, I think that continued education pops into your mind as okay, well, maybe that's the next step forward. And so I want to talk about grad school and some considerations with it. I think this is an apropos time to talk about it too, because I was talking to my grandmother the other day and she was asking me about my student loans and what that looked like. And so I was telling her, and we had this conversation about if it was worth the student loans to going to grad school. But I don't think that that's the place to start. So I think today I want to start with how I made my decision, how I decided what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, and then have loans and scholarships and the application process be a separate episode from this. So I think that this one is considerations when going to grad school. So let's talk about it. When I was first thinking about grad school, I was living in Texas at the time, and I had a job that I didn't love. And I feel like I've said this before, but I went to grad school to stall and to kind of figure out what I wanted to do and what my next steps are. So when I decided I wanted to go to grad school, it wasn't like oh, wake up, go to grad school kind of a deal, right? Obviously, there's a process and you got to think through the pros and cons. I actually have a little pros and cons notebook that I have, and I made 100 different lists about all of the different aspects of grad school. So I knew that when I went to grad school that I wanted to be in a program that was focused on the environment. I wanted to progress what I had done in my undergrad, which I love so much, which was environmental economics, and do something sustainability. I wanted to really dive into that value of myself. So I started researching, Googling, whatever, different sustainability programs so I could get a feel of what was out there for me. And then I also needed to figure out how that would work being in Texas. And so I had to have a very serious conversation with some of the players in my life and see how it would affect everyone. And as a perfect girl, you care a lot about what other people think of you, how they're feeling, how they're going to respond to a change, especially a change as big as a program that's 2, 3, 4, 10 years. And so I think that that was step one, was really like researching it for myself first and figuring out what programs were out there and if there was anything that spoke to me of what I really wanted to do, and then talking to the people around me and seeing how they would react to that change. And I'm not saying that perception should be a deciding factor by any means, but I do think that in such a big instance, for example, for me, I moved from Texas to Colorado for grad school, and my whole family lives in Colorado. It was like whatever, but also my husband, boyfriend at the time, had a job in Texas. And so there was a lot of considerations to be made to make the switch to Colorado. And I applied to more programs than just Colorado programs. I applied to a program in Seattle, and I think I applied to a program in Minnesota. But I applied to programs that were very sustainability focused. And when I first applied to the one that I ended up going to, it was a dual program for Masters of the Environment and Masters of Business Administration. So with my environmental economics degree, I thought, whoa, what a perfect blend of two things that I value a lot and I'm really good at. So I went forward with applying to the MBA, Masters of the Environment dual degree program, even though it meant that I would be in grad school for 3 years instead of 2. And that was a personal choice that I made. And I didn't even end up following through with it. But I did apply, but I applied to a couple of other programs doing sustainability in some other places as well. So I think my point of this is when you're deciding to go to grad school, step one, look around at programs and see what the descriptions are. If there's any like rate your teacher things for the program, and see like what the titles are and what the descriptions are. Because if you're thinking, I want to go to grad school for sustainability, What does that mean? There's 100 different sustainability areas of focus out there. So, looking at different program titles can help you narrow down what you're really interested in. And I would say that going to grad school was not a whim for me. It had been something that's kind of been playing in the back of my mind for a long time. I'm glad that I ended up following the path that led me to my MBA. And so I think that there's a big ask. Should I go to grad school? And my answer to that is there are so many considerations to think about when going to grad school because not every program is made the same, not every school is made the same, not every student is made the same, and all the reasons for going are not the same between people. My stalling isn't even the same as some other people's stalling. I went knowing I wanted to focus on sustainability, even though I was getting my master's in business. So it was kind of a stalling to figure it out, but a stalling towards progression. But there are reasons to go that are stalling for stalling's sake and just kind of going to not work or going to avoid something or going because you have no idea what to do next. And all of those things are very valid, and I'll get to that in a minute. But in my experience, having a purpose in mind is a really good place to start. Looking at grad school programs, figuring out what's actually out there, really good place to start. Having a conversation with someone who is very important to you and knows you really well and knows if you're really going to enjoy that or not based on your description of it and based on your excitement level of it, really important. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. And then I guess start applying. But I only applied to programs I was really serious about. I only applied to programs I was like, okay, if I get in here, will I uproot my life and move to Seattle or Colorado or Minnesota and go to that program? Will that be worth it for me? Not loans or anything like that, but will it be worth it to move to that place? And then you have to consider the time consideration of grad school and if you're going to work during it and setting up the structure of it. There's a lot of considerations. Oh my gosh. So that's kind of my long spiel of my initial story of how I got into grad school was that I wanted to get out of my job, but I knew the field I wanted to be in, so I looked at programs and I started applying to them, to ones that I was serious about. But there are some other things that I've heard for people going to grad school. So, like I said, stalling is the most frequent reason. Even if they don't phrase it as stalling, even if they're like, "Oh, I'm here to figure myself out. Oh, I'm here for XYZ whatever." They're there because they want to figure out their next step, and they needed a minute, and they needed to learn more about it, so they did it. But once you go to grad school and you get a master's degree in something, you're not stuck in that forever, obviously. You can do other things other than your degree, but it will teach you a lot about that degree and that specific area, so be sure that you wanna spend the next 2, 4, 10 years learning about that topic. When you go to grad school, there are what I call real reasons, and then there are fake reasons. I want to clarify that when I say fake reasons, I don't mean untrue reasons. I mean the reasons that we put on, like a mask or a face, to justify our decision to go to grad school and sort of feed into the external perception of why we're making a choice. So the fake reasons are something that we are saying outwardly so that it can feel like a justifiable decision to others, and then we don't have to say the real reason, or I guess the deeper reason, which is that we're stalling or we desperately need to throw a wrench in our plan or anything like that. So when I say fake, I do not mean untrue. I mean the external perception of choice. So when you're filling out an application, they usually say, why do you want to be a part of this program? Like very much like a interview question of like, why do you want this role? And then in that you put whatever you think they want to hear, right? Like that's what you do on an application. And it's what you say in networking. When I first went to grad school, I said that I wanted to open up a nonprofit and do policy for water accessibility and water treatment. In my undergrad, I had a huge focus on water accessibility and making sure that water was good and drinkable and refined, and how a lot of people, when they think of water accessibility and water cleanliness, they think of Africa and some like third world countries that don't have reliable access to water. But that is a problem in the United States too. So I gave this whole entire explanation of how I was very passionate about water and how I wanted to open up a nonprofit to help with water rights and water policy, to help with the cleanliness and accessibility of water. And that's not a lie. It's not a lie. But it is not the whole truth, because my real reason for going was that I needed to figure out my next steps and I needed to break away from what I was doing at the moment, go to grad school, and figure out and just kind of throw a wrench in my path. I was going one way, the 9 to 5 route, and I needed to throw a wrench in it and I needed it to be really dramatic so that I could veer off and do something totally different and find who I was through this completely different path. That was the real reason for me going. But the motivating reason, the reason I put on my application and the reason I say in networking is that I wanted to open up a nonprofit and do something really powerful. Now, obviously, I'm not the owner of a water policy nonprofit. I work at nonprofits that deal with social advocacy, which is amazing. And eventually, one day, maybe I will want to contribute to water rights, cleanliness, accessibility, something that's very important to me. But never in any point of the process did I actually think I was going to open up a nonprofit for water rights. That was just kind of what I said. And that is true of everyone who goes to grad school. Almost everyone. Where on your application in networking, even during the first like orientation phases when you're meeting someone and they're like, "Hi, so why did you choose to go to grad school?" And then they will tell you that reason, their fake reason. But then you get to know them through the 2, 4, 10 years that you're in school, and you'll realize, oh, you were not here to do that. You were here to progress your career. You were here to stall. You were here because you also needed to throw a really dramatic wrench in your path. The next one that I wrote down, but I actually think is not the next most common, I think it's probably the least common, was genuine love for the degree and learning. So wanting to expand your curiosity outward of what you already had that understanding of. And I that wasn't very common in my master's for a business, but I did see a lot more of it in like masters of arts or masters of some other things. I had a friend who was doing a master's degree and was really into theater. And so he went literally so that he could go to all of the theaters and take theater classes outside of the degree and then like progress himself into the theater movie space within his business degree. And I actually had that in undergrad too. I had a friend who was a chemistry major, but she was really into art. And so she took a ton of art history classes and now she does chemical art restoration. So, like, curiosity, wanting to learn more about a specific subject so you can apply it to something that is like really valuable and meaningful, but you went more to increase your learning and curiosity rather than progressing in the field. The third one, which I think is the second most common after stalling, is networking or needing education to move up in your field. I had a lot of friends in my business program who were there because like their corporations paid for it or there was some situation where they needed to get a master's degree in order to move to the next level of their job. Networking is also a really big one in grad school. I don't know if this is true of all programs, but I really feel like it is because when I was a chemistry major, I was friends with a lot of chemistry PhDs, and they had networking events all the time where they would go and they would talk about chemistry and they would just talk to each other about all kinds of different networking stuff. But in my business one especially, there was networking events every day. And it was with my peers. It was with people in Denver looking for employees. It was for internships. It was with alumni, all kinds of different networking events. And I think that that is mostly true of grad school because they want you to get a job after you graduate. So honestly, if you're going to go to grad school, take advantage of literally everything. Do the social events, do the networking events, go to your career counselors. Their job is to make sure that you get a job and that you're getting everything that you want out of the program. And I know a lot of people who have just been sitting around in grad school, going to their classes, doing the bare minimum, when grad school is about the other things. It's not about the learning as much as it is about the other things, about your lab work, about your exploratory volunteer programs, about your networking events, about utilizing the resources that are available to you. There are different structures of grad school in my program specifically. And God, I wish I would have done a little bit more research actually before I filmed this episode of the different types of programs because this is just my experience. And I'm obviously going to do another episode about loans and scholarships and the application process, which I think I can go a little bit more into structure. But while we're thinking about considerations of grad school, I think considering why you want to go, the main reason, and then what structure you want. So I went full time. I had a little bit of like freelancing jobs that I did, but since I was a full time student, it was really hard to prioritize my time outside of everything that I was doing with grad school because I was involved in everything, all of the like student leadership and stuff. So that was full time. If you're not involved in student leadership and you're not involved in all of these clubs, it's easier to have a job on top of the full time program from what I saw other people do, but it is a real balance. For hybrid, which is like half online, half in person, I know a lot of those students did have jobs and they were in the hybrid program specifically because they had jobs and they wanted to keep their jobs and just like kind of work when they had the time to do that. And the hybrid program and the full time program had a lot of overlap of professors, but it was a little bit harder to get us all together, the hybrid students and the full time students, because hybrid students maybe didn't live in the same area as the full time students. And so there was kind of a divide between the cohorts, full time, hybrid, and evening. So we didn't all talk to each other all the time, but hybrid is another structure option depending on what you want. Then there's the evening, and the evening students were there because they had full-time jobs, but they wanted to be in person. And so all of the evening classes were like 6 to 9 p.m. And I don't know that they were every day, but I feel like they might have been. I took a couple of evening classes as electives when I was in grad school. And if that's something that speaks to you, if you have a job and you need to progress that job, or if you have a family and you can only go at night, the evening is a really great option for those kinds of lifestyles. So I obviously just said that I was involved in a lot of stuff and that if you're in grad school, you should involve yourself in everything. I really do believe that. But I want to talk about what I was involved in really quick and just kind of give you my experience with that. So I was involved in student leadership. I was the JEDI representative, which stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So I hosted events for student leadership based on those values, and I worked with the administration to make sure that we were following diversity guidelines. So I did that. And then I was also the president of a fundraiser that dealt with diversity scholarships. So I put on a huge gala the 2 years that I was there that had a silent auction, a live auction, and I planned an event with a student committee. And we put on this like really beautiful event to do scholarships for incoming students. I also went to a bunch of social events. So our social chair is one of my best friends, but he always planned like tailgates. We had a Thursday night out with everyone and we would all go to this bar and there was a tab based on like the social budget. And so we would all just drink beer and hang out. And he planned a bunch of things. And then our going away end of year party was a prom theme. And that was really, really fun. We had a DJ, we had a photo booth. I actually have a photo that I'm looking at right now of all my friends at prom, all of us dressed up to the nines, and we went out to dinner beforehand, and it was just a really cute theme, I thought, and he put that all together, and that was really cool. So I don't know, just the social aspect of grad school, I think is so important. I really feel like grad school is a choice that not everyone makes, right? And so making the choice to go to grad school, you're instantly going to be surrounded by like-minded individuals. It's not like college where you're going and then you meet everyone from different facets of life and you're all in different degrees and you have to find time to hang out together and you're all doing different things and you talk about different things. It's a different experience because the social aspect of grad school and higher education than college is very much like you're with people who are doing the same thing as you. And you talk to them every day about the same thing. You hang out with them regularly. You see them almost every single day in your classes. And in the first year of my program, the whole full-time program moved together to our classes, and so we all got really, really close because what else are you gonna do? We saw each other every single day, we were on group projects together. If we had a problem, we would go in the Slack and all just Slack to each other, and we all Slacked memes during class. Ooh, that feels like a really aggressive word on this podcast. But, and then the second year, we all broke off into our individual electives, and then we were even more sort of cliquey because we were with people who had the same interests as us doing the same electives, but you still saw the same people every day and you made these lifelong connections with them. And the social aspect of grad school is so different and so important. And I think that if you are trying to make this decision to go to grad school, I think that that is a huge selling point that no one talks about. They talk about, oh, yeah, education, oh, the things you're going to learn, oh, the things you're going to read. That is true. The people you're gonna meet in networking, that is true. That's true. But the friends that you're gonna make, absolutely insane. I value my friends so highly, and my mom has a PhD, and she still talks to her friends from her PhD. She still talks to her professors from her PhD regularly. And I really think that that's a highlight of grad school, is the social aspect. And I'm not a social girly. I don't like to get out there and put myself out there. But grad school really changed my perspective on that. And it really taught me a lot of things about myself. And I think that my program specifically was geared towards a lot of internal reflection. So it was geared towards a lot of like, how do you be a better leader? How do you be a more empathic leader? How do you be a better presenter? How do you do business better from like a emotional standpoint? The humanness of business, as Corey said in one of my past episodes. But I think that that's true of a lot of programs because I knew people in the like aerospace program. I knew people in the chemistry program. I knew people in the environmental program, even though I didn't see them every day. But they felt very similarly that they, even if they weren't being taught those things directly, they learned a lot about themselves. They learned about their time management skills, their ability to interact with people, their ability to make friends, their ability to utilize their resources in a really efficient way. And I think that it really taught me, how to Google things better and how to look around my town and see the resources that are here. Because when you're in grad school or college, you have the rec center, you have the library, you have all those things at your fingertips. And then when that you no longer have that, I think more so than in college. Once I graduated grad school, I really missed all of those things because I learned how to use them in grad school. So now I'm a member of the rec center in my town and I have a library card, and it just really taught me to value the at your fingertips aspects of things, and it taught me to really value the friendships and the social aspects that I made in grad school. And that is my long list of pros for grad school. I probably have more. I really loved grad school, and I don't think that that should influence you to go or not. I just am saying I really liked it, and if you want to talk more about it, I'm happy to. I'll talk about grad school all day long. Now, though, I want to transition into cons and some things to consider. I think on the pro side, maybe something I didn't touch on too much is the learning aspect. Obviously, you're going to learn a lot and you're going to progress. And even if you don't figure out exactly what you want to do after grad school while you're there, I think you're going to learn a lot about yourself and a lot about the field that you went for. But I think that one of the main cons with grad school is that it can kind of push you back towards a perfect girl mold mentally. It's a huge mental load to go to grad school. It's a lot of juggling, a lot of the student schedule that you maybe aren't used to anymore. And even if you are, it's a different kind of student schedule than I think college is. It's very overwhelming. And then all of a sudden, you're that high school girl again who cares very much about getting an A, who cares very much about staying up until the early morning hours, who is loaded up on caffeine and no sleep, and who cries at the drop of a pin because you're so overwhelmed with everything that you have going on. It's a huge test of time management. It's a huge time commitment. You're going to be there for years. And you're going to be in it for years. And you're going to be learning for years and overwhelmed for years. And I think that that's something to really consider. And I know that everyone talks about loans and how expensive grad school is. And yes, that's a consideration. It's very expensive. and you'll probably have to get student loans if you'll have to fill out your FAFSA every year, which sucks for everyone. You'll have to include it on your taxes. Like, there's those considerations, right? But then I think there's also the thing people don't talk about. It's the mental overwhelm of grad school. And if you don't have a job while you're in grad school, then oftentimes when you're at this age, you can feel like you're not living up to your full potential because you're continuing your education instead of getting a job. You can feel like everyone in your life who's not in grad school is looking at you and saying, "Oh, it's not that hard." And you're just not really doing anything, but really your calendar is stacked on things. You're doing homework, you're trying to juggle extracurricular activities, you're trying to juggle a job if you have one. Like, it's very overwhelming. And then there's always the added pressure of, I need to get a job after grad school. And so you start putting a ton of mental energy towards looking for jobs, looking for internships, redoing your resume, going to resume workshops, asking people to review your resume, doing coffee chats, and including all of that into your schedule. And I really thrive in that kind of environment of wearing a lot of hats and being very overwhelmed. I don't know that that's a good thing, but I know as a type A perfect girl that I do, and you might too. So you might be thinking, oh, I don't really mind that. But when you're in the moment, I just think it's something to consider that it's incredibly overwhelming and it's a huge mental load. And if you're not, I guess, ready to embrace that mental load of where you are in your life right now, then maybe grad school is not right for you right now. I guess what I'm saying, and it feels kind of obvious, but I think it needs to be said explicitly in this grad school considerations video, is there is an opportunity cost to both choices, to both going to grad school and not going to grad school. And if you don't know what an opportunity cost is, it's a really basic economic term, and basically it's the cost of whatever you're doing. So what you're giving up in favor of doing something. Like if I'm going to work for 30 minutes, that means I'm not reading for 30 minutes. So the cost of working for 30 minutes is reading. With grad school, that's true also. The cost of going to grad school is obviously to some extent giving up a 9 to 5, the relationship tension that it will put on it. It's time. Like, if you don't go to grad school and you're working a 9 to 5, then you just have your 9 to 5 or whatever you're doing, and then you can do whatever you want after it, basically. So you'll have more time if you don't go to grad school to do what you want, be a little bit more free. But the opportunity cost of not going to grad school is a lot of missed potential. And the opportunity cost of not going to grad school really comes out to potential and stagnation. So for stagnation, it's very much like you can't move forward through the avenue of education if you don't go to grad school. But then it's also like if you're stalling and you need to throw a wrench in your plan and you don't go to grad school, then that will be the continued stagnation of whatever you're doing in your life right now. If you're feeling like you're in a stagnant pool. But if you need to get further in your career, then that's also the opportunity cost of not going to grad school, is that you're going to stay exactly where you are right now if you do, in fact, need continued education to progress in your career. And then not going to grad school, the opportunity cost of that is like the personal relationships that you're going to make, the networking contacts, all of those kinds of things. So I think it's a big decision. There's a lot of pros, a lot of cons. And I think at the end of the day, they could come out to a wash and they could even themselves out. Do I think you should go to grad school on a whim? No. Do I think that needing something dramatic and continued learning to continue your path be a good reason to go to grad school? Yes. And I used to say no to that question. I used to say, if you're going to go to grad school, don't do it to stall. Do it because you love what you're going to do and you need it to progress. I disagree with that now. Having been to grad school, I learned so much about myself that I don't think I truly understood what grad school was about before I went. I do think that if you need to go to take a minute and figure it out, that that's a good reason. Do I think you should go if you need to progress your career? 100%. Yes. I think that there's a lot of reasons to go. And I think that there's a lot of reasons to not go. And at the end of the day, it's like what's best for you. And maybe doing like a risk assessment, like I've talked in a couple of my different episodes about, is like figuring out what do you want to risk in order to go, and what do you want to risk in order to stay where you are right now. And those are my thoughts on that. This is going to be a shorter episode than I thought it was going to be, but that's okay. That's all right. So on the next episode of Grad School, I really want to talk about loans, the application process, and then I want to talk about relationships and friendships and how grad school kind of impacts them. Because as you're thinking about the mental load, and even as you're thinking about the social idea of grad school, of getting all of these friends and having all of these social events that you're going to, it means that your current friends and your partner and stuff like that is going to feel a lot like a third wheel. I noticed that a lot of like the third wheeling outside of our clique of grad school, because unlike college where everyone has something different going on, everyone in grad school in your program has like a relatively the same kind of thing going on as it pertains to school stuff. And so it's what you talk about, and then that really alienates the other people in your life. So there's that. So then how it affects your relationships, and then also relationships in grad school from what I noticed. I'm also happy to get more specific on the application process or loans, or bring on a guest if that is of interest to you, of someone who looks at grad school applications and could give us some advice on how to fill out grad school applications. I don't know. If you have any thoughts on anything that you want to hear about grad school, or if anything today that I said makes you feel like, oh, well, could we expand on that a little bit? Just comment on this episode or DM me on Instagram, and I'll be happy to talk more about it. I think that's all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope that you learned something about considerations to consider for grad school, something to put on your pro-con list. If you do think of anything else that I didn't cover today, or that you want me to dig deeper into, just comment or DM me, let me know. If you wouldn't mind rating and following the podcast, any interaction really does help. And if you would like to follow the podcast Instagram, it is darksideofperfect.pod. That is darksideofperfect, period, P-O-D. I hope you're finding joy wherever you are today, and I hope that you are making the right choices for you wherever you are today. Sincerely, a fellow perfect girl. I will see you next time.